We are super excited that you're joining us here for this Advent adventure. Welcome to week 2 of this exciting new small group series. Each week we gather to spend time together as we get ready for Christmas.
Now we know it's a busy time because after all, Christmas is coming. Now does that phrase bring excitement and joy, or is it more fear and dread? Are you overjoyed or are you overwhelmed? No matter where you're at, we're glad that you're here. But Carrie, I got to find out, do you have my present yet?
No, but we need to remember that Advent is a word that simply means coming.
And Christ followers celebrate the coming of Jesus to this earth.
Now this week, the song we're singing is O Little Town of Bethlehem. The theme, of course, is faith.
One of my favorite songs. Think about Mary and Joseph on this trek to Bethlehem, 9 months pregnant, on a donkey, or on this trek to Bethlehem. I can't imagine my wife Julie and I would be talking very much on this trip. She might be saying some things to me, letting me know some things as only a pregnant woman on a donkey can.
Right. But this song really reminds me of the trip that they made and their faith in God. And while this little town of Bethlehem may be still that night, we do know that the hopes and fears of all the years were met in Jesus that night.
That's a bar.
Yeah.
All right, listen now.
O holy child of Bethlehem, descend to us, we pray. Cast out our sin and enter in. Be born in us today. We hear the Christmas angels, the great glad tidings tell. Oh, come to us, abide in us, our Lord Emmanuel. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight.
Hi, my name's Val. This is my wife, Shannon. We've been part of Northwest Christian Church for 35 years, or approximately around there. Raised our kids here at the Newburgh campus, and just recently moved to McMinnville, so now we're part of the McMinnville campus. You know, we've been asked to share a little bit about our faith and maybe how that's important this season, but you know, in my mind, it's important all the time. You know, God tells us in His Word in Hebrews that we can't please Him without faith. And it's because it's important for Him to, us to believe in Him and to trust that He rewards us for doing good things. And without faith, we can't do that. Also later on in Romans, it talks about that we get faith by hearing His Word. And I think between those two things, I kind of tried to boil it down into how's that impacted our lives, and it's pretty much us acting on what God's led us to do in His Word. I mean, there's all kinds of verses in the Bible that say He tells a story and then He says, therefore go do this. And I think that's one part of faith, is going and doing those things, because often those things are not things that we're comfortable with or we don't think we're capable of. I think the other aspect is abiding in His promises, because sometimes life kind of kicks us under the belt and things are wildly out of control. They're not something that we choose to act on or anything, but we find that He can meet us in those places and through different life experiences. So it's kind of those two things that have kind of kicked us, made me think about faith and how that affects us in our life. And I thought maybe just to start out with some things that have helped us grow by acting is just early on is trusting in God with not only our lives and our marriage, but our resources. And something that's not very intuitive. I know early on when we were married, you know, we didn't really have a lot of extra at the end of the month. And the thought of giving anything to God just didn't seem possible. I mean, our kids thought it was great to get a pizza once a month. They thought that was extra special. But eventually through circumstances, some of that was the ministries here. At the time, Lee Schaefer was really involved with Faith Promise, and the church was, that I thought, well, it's at least I can act with a little something. I can give a coffee or $5 or $10 a week and just see what happens, trust God with that. And it's funny how God's honored us throughout our life by doing that and eventually getting to the point where, you know, this is silly. I need to trust God with all of my resources and the full tithe. And maybe there's been some examples in our life that, you know, He's provided through that. And one of those things is just providing not only financially for us, but also changing our heart in a more of a generosity perspective and being more willing to give not only to the church, but to others.
I think too that we gave time. We looked at tithing as our gifts, our spiritual gifts, and how we could apply them to the body of the church. Whether it was in youth ministry or children's choir or helping with some carpentry and some repairs that always seemed to be needing to be done. The things that we had giftedness for and talents for, we were able to apply and considered that to be part of our giving and tithing, which also exponentially increases your faith because you can see how it affects and how it changes and how it impacts the community around us. At that time, we're raising 3 children on a single income that was not very big. And I remember thinking, well, I'm going to have to figure out how to do dinner that becomes dinner 2 or 3 nights in a row rather than just 2 or 1. And how are we going to stretch the budget to get the diapers and you know, all these other things. But at the same time, I acknowledged and recognized that the man I had married was a man of faith and integrity, and if he thought that we could do it, we were going to do it. And that was what I was able to fall back on, not the doubt about how far my $100 every 2 weeks went, but the faith that if he thought we were capable of doing it and God was going to meet us there, I could trust that.
For me, there's 2 parts of faith, and which I kind of started at the beginning. One is acting on God's word, and the other is abiding or believing in his promises. And I think the giving gave us a little bit of confidence early on in our younger years to see how God provided just by us acting and acknowledging his word and what he's commanded us to do. And I think as we've grown older, life challenges get more difficult. I just hate to say that. I mean, the world's a rough place. I mean, people we love die or get sick, or sometimes we're just victimized, completely out of our control. And those are not things that are part of our free will. Those are things that we just need to get through. And thank goodness we have a God that loves us. And I think for us, early on, we've had a couple friends that have had cancer. Shannon and my friend Shelley Collis has gone through years of battling cancer, and just seeing her heart and the transition that that's made in her life has been inspirational for both of us, I think we can say. So I think shortly after our experience with Shelley, I went in for a routine exam and I was diagnosed with cancer. At the time, they said it's stage 3. It didn't sound too good. And a lot of waiting to kind of go through that process. It was the first time probably in my life that things were completely out of my control. I think as a man that I like to control things, and I think we're all good at doing that, but sometimes in life we have to turn it over to God, kind of surrender to his leading and his path. And you know, he met me in that place really well in a new way. It built the relationship that I have with God even stronger through understanding his love, that he cares for me, that there's good people in this world that want to help take care and walk alongside through those journeys. And kind of my perspective to just love more, be more intentional, probably softened my heart a lot. And I think all of those things were a good thing that came out of cancer. And I think, by the way, it ended up not being stage 3. It was early on of stage 2. And so far, I'm doing well. So God it always doesn't turn out that way, but I feel really fortunate through the prayers of others that for me, it has turned out that way.
I think his theme through the whole thing was surrender. He really worked in that word and through that word and responded to that word of surrender. And when he surrendered, that was where God was the most present with him.
Hey, welcome to this session. Today we're talking about faith, and especially when it pertains to the holidays. And sometimes it can be a very personal thing, and sometimes you're dealing with faith with a lot of people, maybe family, friends, co-workers. What does it bring to your mind when we talk about faith?
I mean, I would say for me, just being able to read through like the narrative of the birth story, it kind of just reconfirms there's so much going on in the Christmas season that can distract me from like what the main point is. But when I hear that birth story, Jesus coming into the world, all the different just circumstances surrounding that, it can't help but solidify that aspect of my faith.
Well, I'll tell you, when my kids were little, I just hung on to faith that we were going to get through the Christmas season.
I hear you. I'm there.
Oh yeah, and even just as a pastor, you're just hoping to get through those Christmas, like the services and every service that we have to pull off, and hopefully it'll all come together and it'll be good. Nathan, you got something to share on faith, and maybe you could kind of focus us in on something good.
Yeah, and we're going through this Advent season. We're in our second week here, and this week we have this focus on faith. And I think in this day and age, it's easy to put our faith in a lot of things. We put our faith in our job to provide for us. We put faith in our family to fulfill us. In Mark chapter 11, verse 22, Jesus, he says to the disciples, have faith in God. He says, I tell you the truth. If someone says to this mountain, be lifted up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes what he says, it will happen. It will be done for him. Now, I think most of us, we hear this, and we think, well, I've had difficult times where I had faith and I prayed, and God didn't come through for me. I prayed over the cancer. I prayed over our finances. I prayed over the addiction. I prayed for a better job, and it didn't go the way I thought. What Jesus is saying here, though, is not that we can just name and claim anything, and by faith we'll get it, but he is saying that there is no mountain. There is no sickness. There is no stronghold. There is nothing that can keep us from God and his presence and his kingdom. And this is why Jesus came. When Jesus was born, it was God with us. And no matter the circumstances, no matter if things don't go our way, Hebrews 12, it tells us that it is Jesus who is the pioneer, the author, the perfecter of our faith. And this is why we celebrate Christmas and Advent. It's the anticipation, it's the coming of the fighter, the victor of our faith. And what comes to mind when you think about your faith journey? Maybe faith in Jesus is something that's been with you for as long as you can remember. For some of you, maybe this idea of faith in Jesus is something really new and you're not even sure what to think. And I know when I think about my own faith, often I think about times where it quite literally felt like it was all that I have. But what do you guys think about faith, especially now in this Christmas season?
Yeah, that's tremendous to think about, because for me, I grew up in a Christian family, and so I inherited a little bit of my family's faith. And I think about that. There came to a point where I had to own my faith. And I'm a pastor, so I got kids, and one of my number one prayers is, God, would they love you, not do it because I want them to. And so my prayer is that they would have their own faith, that they would have it and it would sink in personally.
Well, first of all, good word, Nathan. And I kind of resonate with what you just said. I have young kids, and how do we pass on our faith? How do we build a legacy with that? And I don't want to just model the right decisions and the right things to do, but I want to model a faith that is strong. You mentioned just being able to see and be reminded that Jesus is the victor. Like, there's victory in Jesus. Sometimes we forget about that. Sometimes I forget about that. So I don't know about you guys, but just being able to be reminded continually that he won. He did the work on the cross. He did. He bridged the gap, and now I want to pass that on to others, including my family.
Yeah, I think about when I think about faith. Sometimes, especially in the Advent and the Christmas season, I get kind of reflective. And for me, it's always helpful to look back. I've got a few more years under my belt than you guys do. But I look back and I can see God's faithfulness, and I can see how he was there, even in the times where I might not have thought that he was there when I was going in the midst of it. And that just strengthens my faith, and it is super encouraging.
That's cool. I appreciate all those words. And I think about you now. Where do you see your faith expanding in God's kingdom this Christmas season? We're going to kick it to you and let you discuss.